recall the talk you gave at the inaugural session of the CME session, Tuning into Your Heart. And not a day has gone by when we all get together and recall some of those moments. And I believe this is an opportunity created to recall some of those moments and bring about that connection that you talk about. This particular session, we have individuals who have read the book. Personally, I felt it's more than just a memoir. That book is truly transformational. There are people who read the book from the intellect, and there are several who read it from the heart. And this is more for the latter, written by someone who is renowned to be a product of the intellect also. So, to start with, I want to read a paragraph. And this is something to do with the special occasion of the day. So, happy Father's Day, all of you, on this side. As we were reflecting on the book, it was interesting, we found things that are so relevant that within a paragraph, randomly open the book and read a paragraph and there's a takeaway. How often does that happen in any book? So let me try to highlight. Personally for me, this paragraph I'm going to read is a call for action. Oftentimes, we convey the love and affection in our minds. It is ever resident in the heart, but refrains itself from translating into action or words. And this paragraph will communicate the essence of bringing it out, or if you've not been able to, how you could possibly take action. Nevertheless, let me go through these lines. I fell asleep, but I was restless. I had never been on an airplane. I didn't know anything about the place I was going. I was scared. I was tired. Finally, I did fall asleep, a deep sleep. Suddenly, I woke up. I wasn't sure what woke me up. I was just up and awake with my eyes wide open. I looked around, and at the end of my bed was my father. He looked at me. He looked well, better in fact, than I had seen him for a long time. He was calm, had a look on his face that wasn't a smile, but a look of kindness and acceptance. He said, "Hello, son. I came to say goodbye. I'm sorry I wasn't the father I wanted to be. I'm sorry I wasn't there for you. Each of us has a path. I had to take mine. I want you to know that I'm proud of you and love you very much. I have to go now. Remember that I love you. Goodbye, son." I said, "I love you too, Dad." And then he was gone. I sat up. I wasn't sure if I was dreaming or if it was real. I didn't know what to think. I just sat there thinking that when I saw him, I was going to hug him, tell him it was okay, that I loved him. I fell back asleep until the phone rang and woke me up. I picked up the phone slowly, half awake. It was my father's doctor. He wanted to tell me that my father had passed away an hour before and that he was sorry. He said that right before he died. He opened his eyes and smiled. He wanted to let me know that he wasn't in any pain when he died. I thanked him and hung up the phone. I called my mom. We both cried. She said he had done everything he could and that deep down he was a good man and that he loved me very much. My father did love me. I knew he loved me and I loved him.
Well, the background of that story, as some of you may know, my father was an alcoholic, and he had struggles his whole life, and he often wasn't there. And as a child, I used to have a great deal of anger about that, and felt that he had ignored me and wasn't there for me. And subsequently, what I realized was that, like each of us, we have our struggles. And for some of us, those struggles are overwhelming to us. And as a result, we go within ourselves because we're in so much pain, we're suffering so much, and it's hard to connect with other people. And I finally realized that he did not have the tools to overcome his own suffering. And what happened was that when I realized this, instead of having the anger, and many of us carry anger with us, some for years and years, feeling that someone has done wrong to us, someone's not been fair, and that anger consumes us. And what happened was, when I gained insight and understood that not only was my father deeply suffering, but everyone is suffering, then my anger dissipated. And I was able to forgive him and to see him in a completely different way. Because when you're able to look at someone and see that those parts about them that may seem negative or that you may not like often are a manifestation of their pain, and you can see through that and actually see those parts of them that truly represent the beauty and the light that within them, and separate those two things out, then it's incredible, because you're left with joy, you're left with happiness, and you're left with this understanding that in fact there's a deep love there. And that's ultimately how I came to feel. And the extraordinary thing is that, as you see from that experience, I believe that the reason my father appeared to me was that he was released from his own pain and suffering. And he could present himself as that beautiful being without the burden of that suffering. And that was the gift that he gave to me at his last moment.
Very nice, very nice. One of the things that we look at is, oftentimes a title says a lot about the book. In your case, it says a lot to different age groups. You look at the kids watching that book and they're like, I'm going to find some trick in this. And then you look at the adult and say, oh, he's going to talk about some miracles here. He's talking about the heart and the brain. And yet, both of them are equally enticed to pick up the book. Luckily, neither of them are disappointed. What led you to the topic and title of the book?
To be honest with you, I actually did not really have a desire to write a book, because I already was quite busy. And what happened was that I had been asked to write a book, because I share many of the stories that I share in the book. And I had always turned those who asked down. Extraordinarily, I had been invited to Desmond Tutu's 80th birthday party in Cape Town. And I was there, and part of the event was a book launch party for a book that Archbishop Tutu's daughter had done with a journalist. And at that party, I was introduced to an individual, and like many of us in situations, we go to events and we're introduced to many people, and most of the time we don't remember their names, at least I do. But what struck me about this individual was that he was 6'7", and he was quite handsome. And not many people tower over me.
Over you.
Yeah. And so he simply introduced himself. And about 2 months later, I was giving a lecture at Stanford, and I looked out, and lo and behold, he was in the audience. And I said, is that really the same person? The event ended, and he was gone. An engineer named Ming, and Ming is a dear friend. And he had asked me if I would consider hosting this party at my house. And I had literally just moved into the house 3 weeks ago and forgot to tell my wife that I had agreed to host this event. And you can imagine how that went over. But the event did happen. And lo and behold, I did not make the guest list, and who was at this party? This same fellow. Now, maybe he thought I was attractive, and maybe that was the connection here. But regardless, he came up to me, and he introduced himself again, and he said, I'm a literary agent. He said, I've been following your work for 2 years. He said, I found it very, very meaningful, the work you're doing, the talks you've given. And he said, I'd like to do a book with you. And he said, I only do books with individuals who inspire me. And he said, but more importantly for me, my father's 86. I've shown him many of your videos, and he's been profoundly moved. And he said, I would like to give this as a gift to my father. So, being the emotional, sentimental guy that I am, I said, sure. Now, most of us, right, would have Googled the guy at least, right? And said, who is this dude? And I didn't know. I simply said, okay. And now it turned out his father died years before. No, I'm just kidding. He was a good salesman. No. But anyway, I agreed. And again, I never Googled him or learned anything about him at the time. It turned out, though, that he was Tutu's literary agent and Mandela's, as well as he'd done books with Richard Branson and a variety of luminaries. And so that's where the book came from, actually. And then from there, the title, as many of you may know, at the age of 12, when I was in despair because of my personal situation, my father was an alcoholic, my mother had a stroke, she was partially paralyzed, she was chronically depressed, attempted suicide, neither of my parents had gone to college, we were on public assistance. I felt a sense of despair and hopelessness as this child, and I also felt anger and hostility. And you know, when you feel that you have nowhere to go or no possibility of leaving a very difficult situation, it does create this sense of hopelessness. And at the age of 12, I was had an interest in magic, and I used to have this Stingray bicycle and would ride it around. And one day I went far beyond the usual place where I ride to a strip mall, and in the strip mall was a magic shop. And I walked in, and the owner wasn't there, but there was a woman there, and it turned out to be his mother. And I think many of us can recall situations where we meet an individual who just radiates love and embraces you with their kindness. And those types of individuals allow you to let your guard down, because many of us carry this defense against the world, this projection of ourselves that we want to appear as if we're strong, if we have everything together, if our life is perfect. And it's a projection, it's not really real, because many of us actually are suffering. And for me, I was suffering deeply. And this woman's manner and her smile was such that I was completely disarmed. And we began a conversation. And after about 20 or 30 minutes, she looked at me with this incredible smile. And she said, I really like you. I'm here for another 6 weeks. If you show up every day, I'll teach you something that could change your life. And how many people get that gift? And also what we forget is sometimes we can be the giver of such a gift, no matter who we are. And the gift that she gave me was that over that 6-week period, she taught me how to see the world in a different way. She made me understand how fear, anxiety, stress was profoundly affecting me and not allowing me to be present. She made me understand that I had created a dialogue in my head that was very negative, that was hypercritical, that said I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't smart enough, that the reason that I was in my situation was because I deserved to be in the situation. And what I realized was that I had created a prison. And I had created a prison that limited my own ability to be my true self, my best self. And she taught me how to escape from that prison. And ultimately, that interaction allowed me to open my own heart, be compassionate to myself, be able to embrace others and not be judgmental, and then also to understand the power of visualization and intention. So what would be more appropriate than into the magic shop? Because walking into that magic shop changed the trajectory of my life, and fundamentally, in fact, allows me and has allowed me to be here with you today. And the other fundamental aspect of that is that she made me understand very clearly, even in 1968 when this occurred, the connection between the mind and the heart, and also the reality of what was not even known at that time, which is neuroplasticity and our own ability to change our wiring in our brain and allow us to reach our full potential and to self-actualize.
Interesting you say that. A couple of things that, see, there's several of us here probably thinking how lucky he was. But then, luck is always defined as crossroads of opportunity and preparation. In your case, I guess, opportunity, yes, but then your heart was prepared and willing to accept. How often do you think kids would run into a magic shop and somebody says, I'm going to teach you some tricks, come 6 weeks, and they won't show up the next day? Or they go back home and say, this lady called me, I have to show up there, and then, shall I go? And then, no, you don't know who that lady is. That's the normal transaction. And that is, for me, that moment was magical. Because there was somebody willing to offer guidance. And I like the line in your tribute, you say, insight and wisdom given freely. Now, even at Heartfulness, when we run these workshops and talk to people, it's all done free. Because there's always an aspect that love and the lessons of love and extending it further into meditation has something very special about it. It is priceless. And when somebody opens their heart and offers it, you see the ripple effect you have created, right? By just saying yes to that moment, such a huge ripple effect. We look back and say, look what happened. But you went through that whole journey, staying consistent with this. Of course, you do share the ups and downs in between, but then again, course correction. For you, when you met her, what is about Ruth that made you say, yes, I'll go back to her?
Well, in some ways, I mentioned that. Being able to radiate love to another person just by your presence, being able to make them see that you are not judging them, being able to evoke this sense that you can be trusted. Those are the things that hopefully here, and with these types of techniques to open your heart, it allows you to be that way. Because you see, that's the way we are when we're born. We, racism, bigotry, hate, you're not born with that. That is created. You were born pure. You're born with the ability to give love unconditionally. And unfortunately, as you grow up, you learn things that, frankly, oftentimes do not make you your best self, but actually sometimes promote this shadow. And when you're able to be like Ruth, to just sit and be, and all of you have experienced being in the presence of an individual who right from the start, there's only love there for you. They're not judging you. They're not looking into this area of you that you try to hide from everyone, that in fact oftentimes you're ashamed of or you're fearful about. They just sit there and say, you deserve love, I'm giving you love. And in fact, many people ask me, and I've had the joy and the pleasure of being in the presence of many religious and spiritual leaders. And as an example, they say, what's it like to be with the Dalai Lama? What's it like to be with Amma or some of these other individuals? And I say, the extraordinary thing is that when you're in the presence of somebody like this, immediately you feel joy and love. And why is that? Because you see, in modern society, because unlike many people who've grown up in villages years and years ago, maybe even centuries ago, where it's multiple generations live together, you know everyone in your village, everyone has known you since you were a child, and they know the good parts, the bad parts, they've seen you run around naked, and guess what? No matter what you do, you're still embraced by love. And you feel the sense of love in your community no matter what you do. In modern society, where oftentimes you don't live with even your parents, your siblings are not nearby, you don't know your coworkers really very well, what many of us do is we create a projection of our best selves, what we want people to see. The problem is it doesn't include the parts of us that I was just talking about, the parts where we're shameful about, the parts where we're fearful about, and somebody knowing that part of us. And we hide that. We hide this projection of how we want people to see us. And what we forget is that projection comes at a very deep cost. Because when you have that projection, that forces the person you meet to have a similar projection. And then you never authentically connect. Yet when you're in the presence of the Dalai Lama or some of these other spiritual and religious leaders, you suddenly realize there's no need for this projection. Because they love you completely, with all the parts, unconditionally. And then what happens is that projection leaves you. You don't need it. And then there's a sense of lightness of your spirit. There's this incredible joy. And there's this being able to take this love and then realize that within you is this incredibly deep love. And you've been given a gift. Because then you can give that love to others.
Beautiful. Beautiful. You mentioned about visualization, right? I want to read a paragraph and then let you share something with us, because this is a practical tip and I believe you still practice it. So, I still visualize what I want in life. I see it through a window in my mind that often isn't quite clear, and then I trust with absolute faith that when the time is right, it will be crystal clear. I have learned that this process of manifesting isn't always linear and doesn't always operate on a timeline that is as I desire or makes sense. But whenever I visualize, whatever I visualize usually manifests. And when it doesn't, there clearly has been a good reason it didn't. Can you walk us through a couple of examples of where it truly did, and in some cases, when it didn't, it turned out to be for the better?
Well, one example, which I think, for me, remains quite powerful is for those of you who may have read the book, when I went to college, I really was not prepared for college. And as a result, my dream of going to medical school was at risk. And this is something I had visualized since I was in 4th grade. Yet, the requirements to get into medical school required a very high grade point average. And at the time I applied to medical school, the average grade point average of those accepted was 3.79 out of 4. And at the time, my grade point average was 2.53. Making it essentially impossible. But I had this crystal clear image that I was going to go to medical school. And at the time, it was required that we have an interview and get a letter of recommendation from a pre-med committee to apply. And I went to the office to get an appointment, and the secretary said, "I'm not going to give you an appointment." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "Because it's a waste of everyone's time." And it shows you how people judge. She doesn't know me, she knows nothing about my past, yet based on one number, I was a waste of everyone's time. Now, fortunately, because of my interaction with Ruth, I demanded my dignity be respected and refused to let another person decide my fate. So I told her I was not leaving until she gave me that appointment. And she ultimately did. And then at the time of my appointment, I walked into a room with people sitting like this, 3 people, which of course tells you what that means. And the person leading that group said, "Okay, you forced us to meet with you. There's no way you're going to medical school. Say what you have to say and let's be done with this." And in fact, what I said to him was, "Who gave you the right to destroy people's dreams? You know nothing about me. Yet you made a decision that will impact my life." And I said, "I refuse to let that happen." And then I lectured them for about 45 minutes. And at the end of it, they were all crying. Because what I forced them to do was to look at my humanity and not objectify me into a number. And as a result, they actually ended up giving me the highest level of recommendation. And then as I walked out, the woman who was the secretary handed me a brochure, and it was for a summer enrichment program for socioeconomically disadvantaged students, minority students at Tulane University. And she said, "You know, I think this program might help you, but the deadline has passed." But she said, I don't think that'll really affect you." I called the woman who led the program. She actually did, in fact, let me into the program. And the rest of the story goes, and this actually isn't in the book, they actually accepted me to Tulane. It was the only medical school I applied to. I did not get a degree. So they actually let me in with a 2.53 without a degree. Now, what what happens beyond the book is that ultimately there was Hurricane Katrina, as you may know, which affected New Orleans and damaged the medical school. And the dean actually resigned. He was depressed. And the library was severely damaged. And they were trying to hire a new dean. And it was a fellow from Harvard, and he wanted an endowed chair, if you know what an endowed chair. Typically, a philanthropist donates money, and it's named after that person, and it's a very prestigious thing in academic medicine and academics in general. So they did not have the money for this endowed chair. So I ended up actually endowing the chair. So the dean of the medical school is now the Doty professor. I repaired the damage of the library, and now I'm on the board of governors and the president's council at the university. You see? So it shows you how none of us can predict another's potential. The judgments we sometimes make about people, in fact often, have no basis. And that when we open our hearts and actually embrace people, that actually allows them to reach their full potential. So you see, that is a visualization that had a profound, profound effect, not only ultimately on me, but ultimately on the university itself. And so it shows you the circle. Now, there are many, many things that I visualized, and probably too many to even mention. But when I reflect back on many of those, my intention was not pure. You see, the challenge is that if you have self-interest, if you desire things that will potentially negatively affect other people, that creates an energy that then has a huge impact on its ability to manifest. Now, I'm sure there are people who have had very negative aspirations and they have manifested, and certainly that can happen. But in terms of what I believe in the context of things where I did not have a clear view or understand certain negative aspects, actually I have been blessed because those have not happened. You see, as an example, there was one time where I had invested in a startup that was wildly successful and essentially maybe tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars, and when it went public, yet I had a lockout agreement. And ultimately, because of that lockout agreement, and when the .com crashed, that almost $80 million went to minus $3 million. Okay? But I had visualized that I was going to have all of this money and translated this into, I had already bought a penthouse on the top of a villa in Florence. I was flying around in private jets. I was driving a Ferrari. Because I had visualized that that was what happiness meant. Because when you come from poverty and situations where you have no control, and you look at the media, you think that happiness has a relationship to money, position, etc. And then I lost everything. That was not my vision. Okay? Because my vision, my intention was wrong. And actually, the losing of everything actually ended up being the greatest gift I ever received. You see? So my visualization, my intention, it was not pure. And then, fortunately, the nature of that negative event happening turned out actually to be the most positive event, because what it allowed me to do, it allowed me this inward reflection to understand what was it that was happening to me? And then it took me all the way back to this interaction with this woman, Ruth, in this magic shop, and what she had taught me. And I realized that as a 12-year-old, I missed the section about what it really meant to open your heart. I got the visualization, I got the intention, I got the part about creating a list of your dreams, but I missed the part because I was so empty in the sense that I didn't understand that wealth doesn't come from power, it doesn't come from money. Wealth and happiness come from here. And when you realize that finally it's here, and in fact it's here and it's under your control, that's when everything was possible. And that's actually when I became the wealthiest person possible.
Nice people. Very nice. I know you go on to say, when heart changes, everything changes. And there are lines like this that give a deeper message. But an even greater truth is that when our heart changes, everything changes. And that change is not only in how we see the world, but in how the world sees us and in how the world responds to us. I guess that's what you were trying to relate in terms of capturing the essence of those moments. On another note, with the same thing, I see that you are a living example of how you apply it in your profession as well. We had an opportunity to have a certification for continuation of medical education, and we have a course on empathy and compassion. And our interaction with people who know you, they say he takes it all the way to the operation theatre. And you write a beautiful incident in this about that musician. Can you share that with us? I think that touched many a heart.
So, as a neurosurgeon, I'm faced with individuals who have very, very difficult circumstance. And I mention a patient in the book, which was a woman who was an opera singer. And she just absolutely loved to sing. And really that defined her. And what happened was that she had been having a headache, and of course they imaged her, and the imaging demonstrated an aneurysm in the brain, which is an outpouching or a bubble on a blood vessel. And ultimately that was actually not the cause of her headache, but potentially it was life-threatening because of its size and its location, and she required surgery. And over the period of my interaction with this woman before the surgery, I actually had become friends with her. She had met with me several times. I had recommended she get some other opinions. And so we developed this relationship. And in fact, she'd given me some of her CDs, which were incredibly beautiful. And she said, I want you to do the operation. And I said, okay. And this aneurysm was actually near her speech area. And in fact, these types of surgeries, you can potentially get a stroke, you can potentially die or be paralyzed. And so ultimately I went to do the operation, and I had the aneurysm exposed. And in fact, it was even more serious than I had anticipated, because by this time the wall of the aneurysm was so thin they could actually see the blood swirling in it under the microscope, meaning it was about to burst. And as I was there in the operating room looking at this, and when you do neurosurgery or any type of surgery, you have to turn into a technician. You have to completely objectify the situation as it is a mechanical exercise. But what happened was I started thinking of her. Who she was, her love of music, her love of opera. And when I thought of her, I got scared. And in fact, I had the aneurysm clip in my hand, and my hand started shaking.
Wow.
And I thought, wow, what if it ruptures? What if I can't control it? What if I give her a stroke? And I was overwhelmed. And I couldn't do the operation. So I had to sit back and go into this deep reflection to actually separate myself from this deep empathy and love I had for this person, to actually remove that and become the technician. And it really took me about 20 minutes to get back there. And then I was able to do the operation successfully, obliterate the aneurysm, and cure her. And she did perfectly fine. And after the operation, she was talking to me. And as I say in the book, I drove home, and I think I was in my Porsche at the time, and I had the top down, and I was playing her music.
Oh boy. There is, you talk about significance of the inner compass, but there is a beautiful little, I don't know, lyrics of the song or poetry. I want to read that. I really is high impact. Each of us in our lives experiences situations that cause pain. I call them wounds of the heart. If you ignore them, they won't heal. But sometimes, when our hearts are wounded, that's when they are open. Frequently, it is the wounds of the heart that give us the greatest opportunity to grow. Difficult situations, magic gift. Probably the scenario you just painted, you beautifully articulated that in these words. Now you also talk about the intention being more potent than just the visualization. How do you keep checking your true north? How do you look at that inner compass? Today we have a lot of teenagers here who are looking at you and potentially wanting to become a neurosurgeon with a big heart. How do kids of the millennial generation, identify their true north? How do they look for their compass within?
Well, what parents have to remember is children model themselves after you. And this is the challenge, is how do you be the best example for your children when oftentimes you have your own struggles and you're not perfect, and in fact none of us are perfect. One of the ways is, of course, is to acknowledge your imperfection and use that as an example of how none of us are perfect, yet we strive to be our best selves. The other thing is, and I know we'll talk about this, alphabet of the heart, but there was a 9-year-old girl who actually ended up making this set of compassion beads related to that alphabet. And on her own, she included a golden bead. And that golden bead, she told me, represented the golden rule. And you see, one of the greatest lessons is actually that. Do not do unto others how you would want.
Would not want them to you.
Yes. So if you look at another person and you're contemplating doing something, you reflect on how you would feel if they did that to you. And that will boundary you, because you certainly wouldn't want to be made fun of. You certainly wouldn't want to be bullied. You certainly wouldn't want people to call you names. You certainly wouldn't want, if you were different than others, to be made fun of because of that difference. What do you want? If you think about when you're a child, what it is that you want, it's to be loved. It's to be cared for. It's to embrace another person. And when you keep that as the center of who you are, then you already have a sense of integrity and values and where that compass will lead you. And certainly for me, that's what I've tried to do. And fundamentally, when we lose ego, when we lose attachment, when we understand the true nature of reality, what we see is that everyone is us. And that anything you do to another, you're doing to yourself. And when you're able to understand that reality, then it causes you with every step you take, to embrace the other, be forgiving, be loving, because that's how you wish to be treated.
Very nice. It's you walk through a path. Your path is that of discovery, but you don't know it. You're just going through the journey. Then you sit back and reflect, and you get these nuggets. You put them together to form, as you articulated, as either tricks or rules or something that others can benefit. I must admit that itself is an art, and you've done it beautifully. There's this aspect in the chapter, Giving Up. Our individual happiness and our collective well-being depend on the integration and collaboration of both our minds and hearts. I'll read that again. That's a very, very potent sentence. Our individual happiness and our collective well-being depend on the integration and collaboration of our minds and hearts. You go on to say, the training Ruth gave me would help integrate both brains in my body, the mind brain and the heart brain. But for decades, I have ignored the intelligence of my heart. I thought I could use my brain to lift me out of poverty, to lead me to success and give me value. But ultimately, it was my heart that gave me the true wealth. Talk to us about heart brain and mind brain.
Actually, let me tell you something. I have a statue at the end of my pool. And in fact, I designed this house so that if you open the front door and stand in the walkway to enter the house, you can actually see all the way through the house to the statue, which is centered there. And it's at the end of my pool, and behind it is a waterfall, a wall of rocks that water comes down. And the statue centered there. And the statue is a modern interpretation of a meditating Buddha, but it doesn't have a head. And sitting in Buddha's hands is a persimmon, or a representation of a persimmon. And what does that mean? It's there to remind me to not get lost in my head. Because when everything you do is based simply on your mind, without heart, it can lead to ruthlessness. Yet, if it's only heart, oftentimes it can lead to recklessness. That's why this connection is so critical. where they speak to each other and they modulate each other and they allow you to create boundaries that incorporate both, and the incorporation of both actually allow you to be your best self. The purpose of that persimmon sitting there, and in fact I actually planted a persimmon tree next to this. And any of you who like persimmon, anybody like persimmons?
Oh, yeah.
What do you know about persimmons? If you pick them too early, they are hard and bitter. If you're patient, they become soft and sweet. And this is like experience. Oftentimes, when you have an experience, a negative, what you perceive as a negative experience, it is this hard, bitter fruit that you're being forced to eat. But you see, what you don't understand is with reflection, it actually can become this wonderful fruit that gives you incredible insight and wisdom. And then when you reflect back on, in fact, it was an incredible gift, but it requires patience. And this is the challenge for us, is to be patient, to allow this wisdom to process and to understand that while many of us love when we get accolades, when we've accomplished something, when people tell us how great we are, and we sit with that and we say, yes, I am. Of course, it's true. And it feels good. Is this where you get your greatest insights? In fact, actually, it's the opposite, because it feeds an ego. Yet, for most of us, the place where we get our insights, where we get our wisdom, where we understand the clarity of our path, it's with these bitter fruit that we have to taste. And that's the gift. And yet, we try to shy away from that part, which is giving us the greatest gift often, and we strive to have something that actually has no sustenance. And this is this idea of equanimity, this evenness of temperament, where while you appreciate the ups, you realize what they truly are. You are appreciative, but you're not attached to them. And you understand that invariably the nature of our humanity is such that you're going to have these downs, these negative experiences. And instead of always trying to shy away from that, you have an understanding that there's much to learn from those experiences. So while you don't, let's say, sign up for them, you also understand they're just part of the human experience, and you can learn so much. So you have this equanimity, this evenness of spirit. So no matter which direction things are going, your interaction in the world and with others, again, is this evenness of spirit and temperament. And learning that actually is an incredible gift you can give yourself. Because you see, how many of you have read Viktor Frankl? Man's Search for Meaning? If you haven't, I would recommend it. But it's this idea of all of us are presented with stimuli. And invariably, we respond to that stimuli. And that response can be one of reactivity, without thought, out of fear, or it can be one of thoughtfulness and discernment. And within that pause, where you make the decision of how you're going to respond, is your freedom. When you learn to respond with gentleness, with kindness, that can change everything. And I'll show you how quickly you have within your power to change that. How many of you have been cut off in traffic by someone? I know women would never do this, but for men in the room, you respond to that often with an expletive. I know women would never do that.
Yeah, they would never, yeah.
And oftentimes there might be even a hand gesture. And
I was about to say that women do that.
I've gotten that from women. No, I'm just kidding. And oftentimes, what do? An event has occurred, you have this response. It's an immediate, visceral response. And you're saying the person's insensitive, they don't care, they cut me off, they're an idiot, they're a fool, I almost had an accident, etc., etc., etc. But what if I told you that the person in the other car was a husband, his wife is next to him, she's 9 months pregnant, she broke her water, and she's bleeding to He's trying to get her to the hospital. Mm-hmm. Now what do you think? Was your response appropriate?
Looking for the undo button quickly.
Yeah. And this is the point, is that in that scenario, you would actually escort them to the hospital. You would do everything you could to help them. Yet you don't know what event has happened in that other car. Right? Yet you made a choice and a response. And oftentimes that response can even be dangerous for you. Because there's some people who will speed up to pass them, to say something to them, or try to cut in front of them. And this is just like interactions with people. You know, somebody comes on to you very aggressively. And what's your natural tendency? To stand up to them, to just be as aggressive back. And let me give you an example. I had an individual who I know fairly well, and he came up to me and he was angry, and he was obvious that there was something bothering him, and he was directing it at me. And I could have, of course, looked at him and said, "You idiot, what's wrong with you? You're stupid. Why would you say something like that? You don't know what you're talking about." But instead of having that type of immediate reaction to him, I looked at him and I said, "Tom, this is not you. What happened to you today? I want to hear about it." So he stopped. And he looked at me. And he said, "My wife has cancer." And he had actually lost his job previously, and he didn't take his insurance.
Oh boy, oh boy.
Right? So his reaction had nothing to do with me whatsoever. He was responding to this horrible pain in the situation, and he didn't have any tools.
Yeah.
You see, but people make a judgment about why people are behaving a certain way. And this is, again, can actually be inside the head. Life being the small and evil, you know, right? And so then, of course, I had to decide what I was going to do. So I said, "Well, am I a fool now still?" So I reached in my pocket and I gave him the money. He walked away. Now as I walk from there, now I'm doubly beating myself up. God, why am I such an idiot? My wife's right, I'm too nice, I always think the best. So now I go to this cafe and I'm sitting there in a chair and a table outside, and my head's down again because now I'm even more beating myself up, if you will. Then I feel a tap on my shoulder. And it's this kid. He said, "You know, you were so nice to me, I wanted to introduce you to my..." So we make judgment.
Constantly.
Study Google, actually. And if you know Google, and some of you may even work there, have worked there, for its first 10 years, it employed only the people in the top 5% of 15 universities, typically Ivy League type schools. Because their belief was, of course, that greatness can only happen if you're at the top of your class at the best university in the world. And as you know, Google is an analytics company. And so they acquired many companies over that period of time, and amazingly, many of the people in those companies were not in the top 5% of the top 15 schools in the world. And do you know what they found at the end of all this? The correlation between in the top 5% and being in the top 15 universities in terms of leadership, success, accomplishment, the correlation? Zero. Not one iota of correlation. The correlate, kindness, connection, respect, authenticity. That's it.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, think about it. We're talking about one of the top organizations, and then still 90% of the society trains the minds of their children to be on that assembly line. Despite these facts, probably we seldom share them.
No, and so the point of this is not to be passionate about something. The point is not to attempt to accomplish doing well in school, etc. But the point is that people get lost in what's really important. You see, because connection with another person, having an open heart, giving love freely, not only does that correlate with actually all the aspects of success in life and a life of meaning and changing the world, but it correlates with actually living a life of meaning, because at the end of our days, nobody is interested in saying, I was the wealthiest guy here. At the end of our days, meaning comes from connection. And that is an outward journey. Okay? And all the money in the world cannot make people love you, as we see if we look at presidential politics. It is what's inside and your connection and caring for another. Someone said that the highest compliment you can receive is that when you pass, your children look and say, that is my model of integrity, of value, and of love.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we see it, right? I mean, especially when kids go through schools and colleges, the peer pressure of the alternate facts of life, if I can use that word, is because this is the norm. If I am going to do something different from that, then I won't be considered normal. And they end up just towing the line, generation after generation, year after year. What do you believe could be a potential initiative to change that, especially in schools and colleges? Because I personally don't think, while I think to some extent the schools prepare the students academically for college, they don't prepare them in the sense that you brought to life, right? Call it emotional preparation, or preparing their heart to accept, because that is, I believe, the greatest chasm that they are crossing, and they're to a large extent helpless.
Well, in some ways it's educating parents, you see, because there's this belief that their children cannot be a success unless they go to Harvard or Stanford, or unless they have a 3.9 or 4.0, and it's pressure, pressure, pressure. And the problem is that when a child is brought up with parents who promote that belief, what happens to the child? the child ends up believing that their value is not based on who they are as a human being. It's not based on integrity and values. It's based on a grade and a number. Therefore, the most important thing is to achieve the grade or the number, right? And as a result, that can lead to a degree of ruthlessness where it's the number at all cost. And the fact of the matter is that in life, you're not always going to be able to achieve that number. And if you don't have a toolbox, a resilience that you've been taught that the number is not the most important thing, but you doing the best you can is the most important thing. And this is why when a child fails who's been in that situation, they see themselves as completely worthless. And this is why we have an incredible high number of suicides in some of the schools around here, the high schools, compared to other schools. Because a child has been indoctrinated into this belief and doesn't even know how they could possibly go home and face their parents when they've gotten an A- or a B. Which, can you possibly imagine thinking that way? That a child's worth is only if they get straight A's. And so it has to change in how parents perceive what is success. Because as I just pointed out from these studies, what is truly success? And every study to date now shows that forcing children to do this doesn't actually make them good people. And oftentimes it's quite the opposite. So this has to be an understanding. You know, many of you are from Indian backgrounds, and it seems to me, I have to be honest with you, that I see a lot of patients from India, and they're always doctors or engineers. Has any of you ever noticed that? And it's interesting because I had a individual who is an Indian, and he was an engineer, and he said, I'm 47 now, and I finally realized I don't have to be an engineer anymore for my parents. Wow. And he's become an artist. And now he's been on this entire path because of this obligation he felt towards his parents. And now, only now, does he feel like it's okay to be what he really wants to be. And this is the challenge of being a parent. It's not about what you want them to be. It's about what they want to be. And encouraging them and loving them regardless of what it is they want to be. And if you can give that to your child, because then that gives them a sense that you love them, that you listen to them, that you care for them, and not that they're an automaton who is trying to be something that you want them to be. And as I just said from those studies, if you allow a child to be, that gives them the greatest set of tools to be a true success in life, which is to lead a life of meaning and not try to live your life.
Thank you. You're one heck of a storyteller. I think you moved hearts to several emotions in the last hour or so, but I have to keep an eye on time and respect that I pulled you out on a Father's Day. But I want to use the last 10-15 minutes for two specific things. One, I want you to talk about mnemonics, right? We all use that. I mean, my kids can endorse that. That's my trick to education. And but I still was amazed at how you applied it to the alphabet, as you call it, right? Alphabet meditation, you call it. Can you talk to us about that? Because I think there is a huge takeaway, easy for kids to remember, and hopefully when they leave this place, they'll remember that for life.
Sure.
And after that, I have a personal request. I would like you to walk us through Ruth's trick number 1, which incidentally is the relaxation that Heartfulness practice has. It will be an honor to have you walk us through that at the end of this. Yeah?
Sure.
Thank you.
I was telling you about my experience at medical school. And believe it or not, even though I should, at least by traditional criteria, have never gone to medical school, I did okay. One of the greatest honors I actually received was, do any of you know what the white coat ceremony is? So the white coat ceremony is when students are about to start medical school, they're given a white coat, they take an oath, the oath of Hippocrates in most cases. And then there's typically a speaker who epitomizes the highest ideals of medicine. And I was asked to be that speaker at my medical school, Tulane, which imagine what an honor that was for me. And I realized also it was an immense responsibility, at least I took it as so. Because, oftentimes we look at the practice of medicine and many people have cynicism. They feel that the true sort of peak of medicine was years and years ago. And I don't believe that at all, and I feel that it's an extraordinary privilege to be a physician. So I wanted to impart in these medical students something that could center them as a physician, but more importantly, as a human being. And of course, mnemonics are used to remember things, and especially in medical school. And after actually deep reflection about what I had learned through my own trajectory in life, I came up with a mnemonic comprised of 10 letters of the alphabet, C through L. And so C is for compassion for self, to be kind to yourself, to understand your own value, and then to have compassion for others. D is recognizing the dignity of every person. There's not a single person who is beneath you or above you. We are equal. E is what I talked about earlier, equanimity. F is for forgiveness, understanding that anger that we carry towards others only hurts ourselves and limits our own ability to connect. G is for having gratitude. So often, instead of looking and saying, I am so much blessed, remember, almost half of the world's population lives on less than $2.50 a day. The very nature of being here today means we are so much better off than so many in the world. We have shelter, we have security, we have food. And study after study has shown if you simply have those things, you can be incredibly happy. Yet what do we have a tendency to do? We have a tendency to look and say, they live in a bigger house, they get paid more than me, they drive a nicer car. And what's so amazing about that, this attachment to things, is the antithesis of the spiritual lessons which are found in many of the poorest countries in the world. They have the greatest wisdom traditions, yet people leave those places to come here where we have an epidemic of stress, anxiety, and depression, all because we want. And that want never feeds us. H is for humility. I always tell my residents, you can always tell a good doctor, because when he walks down the hallway, he acknowledges, appreciates, and gives respect to the person who's sweeping the floor, the person who's changing the bedpans, the nurses, because without every one of those people, he cannot do his job. I is for having integrity and values, which we talked about. J is for justice in the context of the reality that because of our positions, we have an obligation to care for those who are most vulnerable. K is kindness, the simple act of caring for another with no expectation of reward, simply be kind. And of course, all of these are contained by love. Now, I want to tell you the rest of that story, which is actually quite interesting. About 2 months after I gave that lecture, I got an email from a woman, and she said, I'm the spiritual director of the largest homeless shelter in the United States. I'm a person of faith. But I'd become so burned out from my work that I resigned. I could not come another day because I had no resources left. All my friends had sent me scripture. Not a single one had had an effect on my decision. On my last day at work, someone shared with me, your alphabet of the heart gave me the strength to return to work. And I was like, caught in tears. So I sent her a note and I thanked her. And a little while later, she sends me another email. She says, you know, this has been so powerful for me. I started using it with our clients at the homeless shelter, and it's been very powerful. It's become a practice that we do every day. A little while later, she sends me another note. And she said, you know, one of my best friends, her daughter makes beads. And as you know, mala or prayer beads are present in every religion. Her 9-year-old daughter took it upon herself to make a set of beads. 10 wooden beads representing each of those letters. And on her own, she added a golden bead to represent the golden rule. I said, oh my goodness. And she said, would you mind if we sold this as a fundraiser for the homeless shelter and our peace center? Of course, I said, absolutely. And then a little while later, this is a very persistent woman. She sends me a video, and she made this YouTube video, and you can find it under Compassion Beads and San Antonio Peace Center, if you search for it. And it shows, it's a wonderful video, it shows this little girl's hands on a golden cloth, and she sets out this string, and she sets out each of the wooden beads and the golden bead. And this woman is narrating this, and she says, again, mala, prayer beads are present in every religion, and we know that through repetition and intention, we can strengthen or create neural pathways. And you can create compassion superneural highways through this practice. And she goes through this thing. It's a wonderful video. So now those are sold all over the world. And if you go to the website actually for the book, intothemagicshop.com, we also did a podcast going through each of those letters, why each letter was chosen, with the science behind it actually, and about the science of gratitude, equanimity, forgiveness, and then a practice that goes through each one of those. And it's amazing how these things spread, because how many of you are on Facebook? There are more than that, I think. So I'm on Facebook, not to promote anything other than the work that I do, but a Facebook friend who's a physician sent me a photograph on Facebook. And he said, I was in Nicaragua on a medical mission, and it was my first day at this hospital, and I went to the scrub room to begin a case, and I found this on the wall, and it was the alphabet of the heart. Isn't that extraordinary? And you know, I have spent many years meditating, and what I have found is that just how you function in the world can be a meditation. Simply walking, even eating can be a meditation. And in fact, what I do at home sometimes is I have these concrete blocks in the backyard that are about 6 feet square, and between them is a gap, which I should never probably put there, but I filled it with loose stones for aesthetic reasons. But if you have 2 children and a dog, what happens to those stones? So my meditation frequently is to walk around and put the stones all back. And it has no purpose other than to sit and be with yourself. But my own daily practice has now become actually sitting by my bed each morning in silence, and then reflecting on the gift of being here, but then I go through the alphabet of the heart, and I actually have a set of those beads. And then I put them in my pocket and carry them with me. And then throughout the day, I invariably put my hands in my pocket, and I pick one of the letters, and then I sit with that for 10, 15, 20 seconds. And it's always a way to center your intention. In fact, I think I have it set here in my pocket, but of course, I could be lying, of course, but and in fact, here, right there, you see. So that is actually the practice actually that I do. So, so it was amazing what can happen through simply one event like that. And in fact, even the book itself is now in 28 languages, soon to be 31. And it's amazing the number of emails that I receive from people who have been moved or transformed, and also they share their own experiences of suffering and how they've overcome that. And oftentimes even the book has been able to help them overcome that. So for me, it's just an incredible blessing to be able to be a vehicle that allows some people to heal their own wounds of the heart.
Beautiful. As we listen to you, your mnemonic, you said it, C through L, you know. Just that, compassion through love, says it all. Beautiful. Thank you very much. Thanks for sharing that. Not that we're all not relaxed now. I think we are listening to you. But would you mind walking us through the relaxation?
Sure, I've actually never read it, so I have to see what I have here.
Sure. This is the script of what typically is used before somebody starts meditating, and we found, almost verbatim in the rule 1.
So if we could just all relax and sit comfortably and close your eyes softly and very gently. And let's just start with your toes. I'd like you just to wiggle your toes, and then with intention, relax them. Feel them relax completely. And just sit there and breathe in and slowly exhale. And then relax your ankles, your feet, and feel the energy move up from the earth, up your feet, to your calves, to your knees, to your thighs, slowly breathing in and then exhaling as you feel your legs become more and more relaxed. You're feeling a sense of relief as you become more and more relaxed. And now you're relaxing the muscles in your back, your abdomen. And as you breathe in and slowly breathe out, you're feeling your chest muscles and your shoulders relax. It's as if your body is melting away as you then breathe in and then slowly exhale. And your arms have become very relaxed from your fingertips to your shoulders. And you feel as if a weight is being lifted from you as you become more and more relaxed. Your neck muscles are becoming more and more relaxed. And then you feel the muscles of your face becoming relaxed, and all the tension in your shoulders and your neck and your face muscles are becoming more and more relaxed, all the way to the top of your head. And your entire body is becoming so relaxed as you slowly breathe in and then exhale. And you feel this lightness because you're so relaxed. And now I'd like you to move your attention to your heart. And you feel your heart beating. And as you sit there so relaxed, you realize that the source of light that connects you to every other is in your heart. That light is the energy that connects you naturally, gently, as it always has, to every other and to the light that is the universe. Slowly breathe in and exhale. You no longer feel your body, you feel your heart and the light within your heart. And just sit with that feeling and feel that deep warmth. The warmth that is the source of that light, which is unconditional love. That love you felt when you were born. And just sit with that for a few minutes. That awareness that who you are is that light. As you slowly breathe in and slowly exhale, simply being that light, that energy, that warmth. And know that within you, that light can be a beacon to others who are on a journey. And that is a journey of connection, of love, of compassion. And that within you is the ability to share that light, that love, that warmth, which not only connects you with the universe, but also connects you with every other being, everything on this planet, everything in this world. And that is true connection, that is true love, and that is what it means to be one and to be heartful. Slowly open your eyes and feel so relaxed and filled with lightness and joy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So Dr. Doty will be available to sign books after the session. I believe we have a few housekeeping announcements. Before that, on behalf of the Heartfulness Institute, I'd like to present you this gem. Before I get up, we all observe that oftentimes you sport a blazer, and behind that blazer is this heart always radiating love. And we have a symbol that we use of a radiating heart. And we believe you will sport this on your blazer, reminding you that folks at Heartfulness always have this ever-flowing, unconditional love towards you.